So I've gone ahead and completed this drawing, including the title bubble, and now this is ready for print. What you'd like to be able to do is as much work as possible on a single drawing, and then we can copy and paste a lot of this information onto the other drawings. Now in this case, I would have also filled out all of the title block information down below in order to do this next process. So I'm going to select Edit and Copy with Base Point. Select the bottom corner. I'm going to select all this information that I put on in paper space because it's not on the model. Anything that I would have had down here, I would have also selected and copied. Press Enter. And now when I actually go to create another page, and I can use an existing page, or I can use a new title block page and recreate everything, sometimes it's easier to use an existing page. And let me show you why. I'm going to take this information and right click on the tab and select Move or Copy. And with Move or Copy, you'll get this menu. And I'll say use the electrical symbol tab and copy, create a copy of it. Select OK, and you'll see down below I now have two of these. This one down here, I'm going to rename. So I right click on it, select Rename, and I'm going to call this the first drawing that we have in this whole series of drawings, which is our construction plan. So I'll call it construction. I have caps on here. Construction. And click off of it. So the construction and the electrical symbols plan is identical. Why would I do this? Well, what I can do now is in the construction tab, make sure it's current. I can take everything that I don't need, remove it. There's an extra line here that I've moved accidentally, so I will copy this line from this location to here. The viewport ends right there, so I haven't removed any of this grid and rear. The grid doesn't print, so I'm not too worried about it. I double click inside and then remove the layers by turning them off in the viewport, the ones I don't need. So I'm going to do the construction plan. The construction plan has the dimensions, but what doesn't it have? It doesn't have the electrical symbols. So I can move those out of the way. And I'm going to click off of that. What else needs to be done here? Well, I need to edit this. The construction plan, in fact, is 1/1. It's the same scale. So I'm going to make sure I'm outside of model space. I'm going to double click outside here and double click on the 2 and change that to 1. Good. Change the text here to construction. Make sure my caps are on. There's one last thing I need to do, and that's just change this line type here. So I'm going to double click inside, make sure I'm in the viewport. So there's my XY axis. I'm going to select these two lines and switch them to hidden rear. I loaded that up earlier. Now it looks like one of them is solid, but it's not. It's landing accidentally right on the grid. And so if I turn off the grid down below, you'll see that it is in fact correct. Now I can press escape, double click outside, and it's done. It's completed. So I used most of the information from the previous drawing into this drawing. And so the last one I need to do here, I'm just scrolling down through your assignment sheet, is to put in what? The actual tile work. So again, I'm going to right click on the word construction here, move or copy. And this time I make a copy of the construction. It doesn't matter. I've already done some editing with this one, so it's easier for me, or less time consuming because all the legend is gone. And now I've got construction 2. And this one I believe is just called floor finish plan. So in here I'm just going to type in floor plan, just so that I have it. I can put in the whole word, but obviously the tab gets long. And here I'm going to change this to floor finish plan. Scale remains the same. What changes here? This is drawing number 3 now. And everything else I think stays the same. No, I'm going to turn off my dimension layer. Sorry, I made a separate layer for that. Don't need that on. Let me try that again. I'm going to double click inside. If I click on the dimensions, what's going on here? I wasn't clicking inside the viewport. I was clicking on the outer edge of the viewport. So when I click on the outer edge of the viewport, which was right where that legend was, I wasn't actually inside of it. So now that I'm inside, I want to make sure that I turn that layer off. There we go. And I don't mind showing you any of the mistakes I make just because it happens in day to day whenever you're working on a project. You just got to be able to identify them and change them immediately so that you know what you're doing. Okay, we have a couple of extra lines here for the tiles, and this is to show up the flooring. So what's not visible is this. Okay, I'm going to double click in here. What layer does this appear on? It appears on a hatch layer. Now that's going to be difficult because if I turn off the hatch layer here, then it's going to turn it off universally on all my projects. So I want to turn that off and leave that on in this particular case. I need to make another layer. And that's a pretty simple process to do. And we're going to call this over ceiling over. And typically we have a different layer for that anyways. There we go. And I will turn that off. Good. So that, I want to turn that off in the viewport. So I'm going to leave that on here. Close this. So in here, double click in here. I want ceiling over off. Okay, we're ceiling over. Okay, it's already by default off because it was a brand new layer, and the settings for brand new layers is it won't show up. Now watch what happens when I select this line and switch to the other layer. It now disappears. Now that I'll make floor current, I need to have some of these extra lines. There we go. Now I don't like the color of the line. That's okay. I'll change it later to a light gray. And if you're not comfortable drawing this line work in the viewport, just go right into the model space and draw it there. Let's see what happens here. I can draw in here. I just have to be a bit more careful. In model space, look at that. This line is completely off. That's why we have to be careful. It looked good in the paper space, but in model space, it's off. That one works, that one works, that one works. Okay. Now, some of these layers I don't need on at this point. I have to remember to turn them back on later on. I don't need the electrical. They're in my way. I don't need my dimensions. They're in the way. I remember I made some of the electrical ones in the wrong layer, so I'm going to turn that one off as well. Okay, now I'm ready to lay out my tiles. So depending on the size of your tiles, you can lay them out so it fits on a grid here, or you can make the grid off, bring it in, and center it. Okay, let's say I want 2-foot by 2-foot tiles. You'll notice also I don't have any of these fixtures. Now I've got to be careful because I don't want a tile underneath here. I want a tile in the shower. So in the floor layer, I'm going to create a line here. I'm going to turn off all of the plumbing fixtures so I don't have interference with them. Also, when I hatch or I place the tiles in here, I don't want to see any of the doors. Now that may cause a bit of a problem. Nope, that's why I drew the line work right to the edge so that I can fit that in. Okay, let's put in some tile. I don't need hatch visible right now. I like turning things off only because the less that I have on my drawing, it's easier to see. Okay, so here we go. Now I'm ready to tile. Let's say this tile you've selected here is a 2-foot by 2-foot tile. I can create a 2-foot by 2-foot square. Now, you may want to show the grout, you may not. For accuracy reasons, you may only to make sure it lays out properly. I can copy this very simply to make the base of this 2468. I think that should be enough for this one. And then I can copy all of this way too. Now, I could have made a grid by creating a series of lines horizontal and vertical and then placing it in. I chose this. It doesn't matter. We can pick either method. Now that I've got this like this, I want to see if it fits. I want to move this. Let's see. It looks like I should be able to take up, yeah, it looks like I'm going to take up the whole floor. So what I'd like to do then is this. I want to center this. Now right now it's very difficult to see, so I'm going to change the color of this floor to something that's a bit more visible. I don't want the magentas. Let's go into a medium gray. There we go. And I want to move this. So I'm going to move this where? from its center to the center of the floor. All right. Right click mid between points. So from there to there, I want to place that grid between there and there. Again, it's a bit difficult to see, so let's just temporarily change the color of this to a nice dark color so we can see it. There we go. So that being the case, what I can do now is trim that item. Okay, extend, trim. So what do I want to trim? I want to trim all this and this. I want to trim this and this. Yeah, I want to trim all this too. Now those lines I'm going to leave to the end and just erase them. Trim that and this and that and trim this. Now you can see if I left that hatching in there, that would be problematic. Now that I've trimmed some of this stuff, I can get rid of some of this other stuff just by using erase or selecting and deleting it like this in here. Since it's trimmed off, it's easy to delete it this way. Just click on it, delete. Where you got to be careful is if you haven't continuously trimmed something. There. See how that's not continuously trimmed? I need to trim this part off first, and then I can get rid of these two. Okay, I still have a bit of a remnants of a line there. And there is my floor tile pattern. Notice again, because we selected flooring, it's coming in as black. There's actually that ceiling line. That's where this is confusing. That ceiling line is showing it didn't turn it off. And now I can see it. So there's my floor tile, perfectly centered within the floor and ready to be used in the project. So I'm going to go to my floor plan. There we go. Now everything's off. Okay, just go back in here and I'm just going to turn all these layers on. Now I'm doing a universal application here, so they all come on. But again, remember how we already have it only showing in certain viewports. Some items come on, other items do not. Again, here, I don't want to see any of the plumbing as well, so I'll turn that off. Double click inside. And plumbing. There we go. Those are all off. And now I can finish the rest of the floor tiles. So now I'm just going to zoom out. And once I have all the tiling in place, make sure you turn off the viewport layer. And that's a universal application. So on each of these projects, the viewport will be turned off. Now, moving to the construction project, I got my floors on. So I'll double click inside, go into my floors viewport, turn that off. Make sure that's what I want to see. Yes. Let's go into our electrical symbols. Here, once again, I got my floor tiles showing. I need to make sure that that is turned off in that viewport, and it is. And what else needs to be turned off in the electrical? Well, I think those dimensions, do they stay on? No, they don't. So make sure that that's off as well. I don't need any dimensions in this viewport. There we go. And I think we're all done. Okay, so make sure all the text information is there, make sure it's in place, and then these files are ready to print and the project's ready for submission.